Woo! Oh, this was bad. So, Smokey Joe came out yesterday and gave a presser, a solo presser, likely coached and doped up to the gills with uppers, most likely from his son's stash, but anyway. First one he's done in, I think, over 300 days, longest time in the last 4 presidential reigns, I want to say. And with good reason, because Joe is...
He's a fucking idiot.
Yes, thank you, President Trump. I will do my best not to overuse the sentiment. As is the case with Joe, all too frequently I might add, everything this fossil says is either a blatant lie, a distortion, or something so astoundingly disconnected from reality that it just leaves your jaw hitting the floor in disbelief. If old Boris's last-ditch effort to remain PM is called Operation Red Meat, then Biden's one should be called Operation Shut the Fuck Up. There is a reason why Biden is kept out of sight and out of mind, and this presser proved very adequately why that is the case, and also why potentially the State of the Union was moved as well. I imagine that this is part of a new strategy to sort of reboot the Biden presidency after one year that really says everything about it. But that makes him sound like a clunky old robot, like his brain is trapped in the 70s, well, it is anyway. But you can't reboot old technology. He's not exactly the $6 million man. The only way to relate Biden to $6 million is either how much he's adding every minute to the deficit or what's his son's monthly drug habit. So I want to run through a couple of things that were said. First off, the economy. It has been over a year. The country is riddled with supply chain issues. Energy prices and the cost of goods are surging. Yet Joe Biden comes out and tries and touts these great unemployment numbers. 6 million jobs made, more than any other president in the first year. Someone tell this guy he did not make any new jobs. Many of those ones were simply the old ones coming back. Secondly, and I do not recall this, and I could be wrong, a single month where Biden actually came close to hitting any of the marks on expected job creation. Where the hell is he getting these numbers from? As well as how they're fudging the so-called record low unemployment. Stop looking at the employment numbers. Look at the labor participation rates if you want any actual data on economic performance. Because he can do this stupid branding shtick all he wants, but the public isn't buying it. He'll try and sell it as, oh, there's an increase in wages. Yeah, but inflation is over 7%. Worse in 40 years since 1982. Your inflation is outpacing your wage growth. The dollar is worth less, you absolute nani. This is basic economics 101. The polling aggregate on his economic performance on RCP has a 55.6 disapproval. Bizarrely, the lowest approval in the aggregate is a Quinnipiac poll, which, tends to skew left, and that had him at 36 points. And I think over 60% think the country is going in the wrong direction. Which brings us to this broken, dead and buried bellback Bolshevik bill he's still trying to push. Now, someone explain to me, if you're touting these record low unemployment numbers, supposedly solid wage growth, this phenomenal job growth, all the while trying to combat record-shattering inflation, why in the hell do you need to pass this draconian amount of spending, as well as Professor won't add a penny to the deficit? There's a reason why no one wants this guy to talk to the press, because every time he opens his mouth, he confirms everyone's suspicion that he's a moron. And on the coup, despite the fact that more people have died under his watch than Trump, despite his little NOD, which clearly does absolutely fuck all, despite the testing debacle, which I will still maintain was deliberate, he says we're moving towards a time where COVID won't disrupt our daily lives, where COVID won't be a crisis, but something to protect against and a threat. To who? Sounds a bit contradictory, nor does it inspire confidence in your lackluster leadership. At this point, the coup just annoys people. But the first question that he was asked, his response generated this eye-opening, oh no, it was going to be a glorious train wreck, and I'll bet you his aides were wetting themselves. It was essentially, sir, you're not going to pass the voting rights, your domestic agenda is dead, COVID is still rampant, and the partisan nature of the country is still as raw as ever. Did you overpromise? No, says Joe, I did not overpromise, but I have probably outperformed what anyone thought would happen. This is clearly one of those jaw-dropping moments. Yes, let me just list a whole bunch of ways of how you screwed the pooch. Nah, I overperformed. On what? Name me a single thing you did that even improved your polling numbers. The 2 things you did manage to pass didn't even keep you from cratering. Now, in fairness to him, We're forgetting that outperformance can also mean negatively. And given that his former boss supposedly said, never underestimate Joe's ability to fuck things up, if by outperformance you then mean manage to fuck things up even faster than anyone thought possible, then yes, Joe, you did in fact manage to exceed expectations. Saying the COVID deaths were down because they were 3 times as much as before. Yeah, that may be the case, Joe, but they were 3 times under your stewardship. And then you would just ramble incoherently about not being able to pass anything with Republican approval because they're all dead set against any piece of legislation that he puts forward. Then asking, what are Republicans for? Geez, Joe, I don't know. A secure border, which you did not speak about, not having record inflation, lower unemployment, not having a runaway welfare state with an insane spending hard-on, energy independence, lower taxes, not being a joke on the world stage militarily. You know, everything that you've managed to undo in weeks. Then on polling, oh Lord, his answers were amazing on the polling. The second question he was asked, he mentions how America agrees with him on a whole host of issues, all spending related. I wonder why those poll well, especially in the midst of runaway inflation. But later on, he is asked about his low polling approval. His reply, I don't believe the polls. Yeah, you at least pretend to when it comes to trying to sell your gimmick. But when it's disapproval, then suddenly it disagrees with you. Then it's, I'm just going to ignore that. The funny thing is, if you scroll through the comments, most people actually agree with him, but they all think his approval is still far too high. And that's why I think the Dems are going to lose, because they refuse to acknowledge any wrongdoing in any of this. No, we're just going to keep driving ourselves off a cliff and try and sell the voters on it. Somehow. Hasn't worked so far, even though people are leaving the Democratic Party in droves. House representatives and voters. Hell, according to a new Gallup poll, Americans' voting preferences in 2021 shifted from a 9-point Democratic advantage to a 5-point GOP lead. That is a 14-point swing in 12 months. That is insane. But that's not a surprise. I made a video about this a while ago when McAuliffe lost to Youngkin in Virginia. Poll Democrats in Virginia could not tell the pollsters what their own party stood for. This was months ago. And the fact that Democrats are still only talking about branding and boasting about their accomplishments when even their own constituents can't tell them what they do because they don't see it. And when their own representatives are abandoning ship, tells you they don't actually have a strategy at all, and these people are seriously stupid. And of course, we can't talk about the Dems without mentioning voting integrity, and oh, this was nuclear level bad. I think the White House is actually trying to do damage control on it. When asked about the doubt of the legitimacy of 2022, he said it all depends on whether or not we are able to make the case to the American people that some of this is being set up to try and alter the outcome of the election. After touting the fact that 2020 had a record turnout, supposedly, no matter how hard they make it for minorities to vote, I think you're going to see them willing to stand in line and defy the attempt to keep them from voting, Biden said, and adding, the increase in the prospect of being illegitimate is in proportion to not being able to get these reforms passed. Now, a bunch of things. Is it just me? Or is that basically saying, if we don't pass these reforms, it is going to be contested as illegitimate? Because that's what it sounds like to me. What exactly is in this that would make the 2022's midterms, in its absence, illegitimate? And don't hide behind that BS of, oh, Voting Rights Act. No. I know damn well enough to know bills are deliberately named like this to keep the public from prying into them. So what specifically is in this bill that you would qualify as voter rights? Furthermore, and I think this is a better question as far as I'm concerned, what specifically has been enacted on a state-by-state level especially from 2020 till now that requires you with such fervor to push the so-called Voting Rights Act? What do Democrats qualify as voter suppression? Now, it's obvious they want to federalize election procedure as well as push this BS claim that voter ID is somehow discriminatory and make mail-in ballots permanent, which is going to facilitate all kinds of shenanigans on a massive scale. Now, they aren't going to tell anyone that they're outright shady bastards, but anyone paying attention knows this is what they're after. Saving democracy is simply Dem speak for America voting in Republicans is fascismus. Even CNN came out and said, Yeah, this is kind of jarring. Maybe scale it back a bit. Now, mind you, another anchor also said sowing doubt in elections is something Democrats and reporters and the public haven't liked about Donald Trump. You people contested every Republican win since 2000. You were Clinton's lapdogs for 4 years crying about Russia every damn day. You financed a fake dossier, involved Russia, a former British MI6 agent, a law firm, and the FBI while burning $40 million of the taxpayers' money pushing that bullshit, and you have the gall to say the election integrity is Trump's doing? The duplicitous arrogance of these assholes. My guess is that they want to keep it vague because if the press tells the public, yeah, we want to get rid of voter ID, the public will raise a few eyebrows and ask, why do you want to do that exactly? It's not a very popular proposal. Voter ID is supported overwhelmingly, by the way. I think 80% of voters? So put that in your democracy pipe and smoke it, you limey bastards. Then, of course, we have foreign policy, and Uncle Vlad is eyeing the Ukraine, and Biden says, oh, he will impose sanctions. Well, you already gave him his Nord Stream pipeline dimension, man. He doesn't really care what you think or do. You don't exactly have any leverage in the region either. But should they greenlight an invasion, a Russian offensive on Ukraine should be successful because of overwhelming military superiority by the Russians. But as well as saying the response would be different, potentially including NATO, should the offensive be an incursion versus a full-blown invasion. And so the result is now a happy Uncle Vlad who can potentially annex the Ukraine, just do it bit by bit, and Biden isn't really going to do all that much. But some of the best moments of the presser, hands down, was Peter Doocy. You all know Peter Doocy. He's the guy in the White House press briefings who's pretty much single-handedly holding this administration to any kind of account. He's also beating Father Time as the best means to AIDS Jen Psaki. Even by my standards, that's a little mean. But Doocy asked, why are you dragging the country so far to the left? But Biden does his usual dentured grin shtick and says, oh, I don't know what that even means, too far to the left. Massive spending on social programs, forcing private businesses to mandate the coup shot, attacking fossil fuels while sucking off OPEC, destroying voter integrity, having a porous southern border, which again he didn't speak about. Probably those things. And James Rosen from Newsmax asked him the defining question of the evening about a Politico poll that said 49% of registered voters disagreed with the statement, Joe Biden is mentally fit. That includes the majority of Democrats. When asked, why do you suppose such large segments of the American electorate have come to harbor such profound concerns about your cognitive fitness? I have no idea. That's it. That's all he said and just moved on. Now, if he didn't have obvious problems with his mental acuity, that outright dismissal would otherwise seem kind of badass. But considering more than 40% of people view him as losing his mind, that's a particularly bad look. So let's sum all of this up. No actual ideas on how to combat inflation or fix the supply line despite amazing job growth and record low unemployment. Congress must pass trillions of dollars in more spending. Joe Biden doesn't look at the polls, but he knows his Quinnipiac approval is 33%, while citing polls to prove that things in his Build Back Bolshevik agenda are popular, but he can't get any approval for it. Uncle Vlad can potentially annex the Ukraine, just don't go full Dong-zo, and despite the media yelling Russia for 4 years and giving Trump crap for contesting 2020, now 2022 will be illegitimate if the Dems don't federalize the election. And hours after the presser, thankfully, Manchin and Sinema sided with the Republicans to doom the effort. If this is a reboot, it's either blown up on the launch pad or suffered a blue screen of death, or in their case a red one. And that's all for today. Until next time.